The Hungry Doll. In the quiet village of Greymore, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, there was a tale whispered among the children, a tale of a doll unlike any other. The story was simple yet terrifying. "Beware the hungry doll," they would say. A small porcelain figure with wide staring eyes and a mouth that seemed too big for its face. The doll, it was said, came to life at night, feeding on the souls of those who dared to neglect it. Sophie had always loved her dolls. She had a collection of them, each one carefully placed on a shelf in her room, their dresses meticulously arranged, their hair combed and braided. Her favorite was a rag doll with button eyes and a soft, stitched smile. But that changed one day when a package arrived from a distant relative, an aunt she had never met, who lived far away in a place Sophie could hardly remember. Inside the package was the hungry doll. Sophie's first impression was one of awe. The doll was exquisitely crafted, with a dress made of the finest silk and hair that shone like spun gold. Its porcelain face was delicate, almost lifelike, with wide, glassy eyes that seemed to follow her every move. But there was something unsettling about its mouth. It was slightly open, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too real. Sophie's mother, charmed by the doll's beauty, placed it on the shelf with the others. Sophie, however, couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with the doll. She would catch its eyes staring at her, even when she wasn't looking directly at it. At night, the feeling intensified, as if the doll was watching her, waiting. The first night after the hungry doll arrived, Sophie was woken by a faint scratching sound, like tiny claws scraping against wood. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, but the room was silent. She looked over at her shelf, where her dolls sat in a neat row, the hungry doll in the center, its wide eyes gleaming in the dim light. She told herself it was just her imagination, and eventually, she fell back asleep. But the next morning, something was different. Her favorite rag doll had been moved. It was no longer sitting upright with the others, but was instead slumped over, its button eyes facing the wall as if it had been deliberately turned away from the hungry doll. Sophie frowned, but her mother dismissed it, saying it must have fallen over during the night. But Sophie knew her dolls never moved on their own. The scratching sounds continued every night, growing louder and more insistent. Sophie began to dread the nights, lying awake in bed, clutching her blankets tightly as the sounds crept through the darkness. She started to notice other changes too. Her dolls were often found in different positions, their faces turned away from the hungry doll as if they were trying to escape its gaze. Sophie tried to ignore it, but the fear gnawed at her. She began to feel like a prisoner in her own room, unable to escape the doll's watchful eyes. She tried to move the hungry doll to a different shelf, but no matter where she placed it, its eyes seemed to follow her, always watching, always waiting. One night, Sophie awoke with a start, a cold sweat clinging to her skin. The room was deathly silent, the air thick with an oppressive stillness. She felt a presence in the room, something dark and malevolent. Slowly, she turned her head towards the foot of her bed, and there it was, the hungry doll, standing on her bed, its wide eyes gleaming in the moonlight that filtered through the curtains. The doll's mouth began to open, slowly and deliberately, revealing sharp, needle-like teeth that gleamed in the dim light. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. her body frozen with fear. She wanted to scream, to run, but her limbs wouldn't obey her. The doll began to move, crawling up the bed, its tiny hands clutching the blankets as it drew closer. In a voice that sounded like the rustling of dead leaves, the doll whispered, "I'm hungry." Sophie's heart pounded in her chest as the doll crawled closer, its cold porcelain hands reaching out to touch her skin. She felt a sharp pain as the doll's teeth sank into her, not tearing flesh, but something deeper, something more vital. It was as if the doll was draining her very life force, consuming her essence with every bite. Her vision blurred, and a wave of exhaustion swept over her. The room grew darker, the world fading away as the doll continued its feast. Sophie tried to scream, but no sound came out. The last thing she saw was the doll's wide, staring eyes, filled with an insatiable hunger. When morning came, Sophie's parents found her lying in bed, pale and lifeless, her skin cold to the touch. The hungry doll sat on her chest, its eyes now dull, its mouth closed, the sharp teeth hidden once more. The doll was placed back on the shelf, a strange, heavy silence settling over the room. The villagers whispered about Sophie's death, but no one dared to speak of the hungry doll. It remained on the shelf, its once vibrant eyes now dark, as if sated for the time being. But the villagers knew the truth. The doll was always hungry, always waiting. And so the children of Greymore were warned to take care of their toys, to cherish them and keep them close. But the hungry doll remained, watching from its perch, its hunger growing with each passing day, waiting for the next child to come along, to love it, to neglect it, and to become its next meal. The Hollow Eyes. In the village of Pinehaven, nestled on the edge of a dense, foreboding forest, the nights were long, and the shadows seemed to whisper secrets that no one dared to speak aloud. The villagers lived in constant fear of the woods, for they knew the stories, tales of dark spirits and ghostly apparitions with hollow, empty sockets where their eyes should be. These specters, known as the Hollow Eyes, were said to be the souls of those who had died within the forest, their eyes stolen by the malevolent forces that lurked among the ancient trees. The elders warned the young never to venture too close to the forest, especially after dusk, when the Hollow Eyes were said to roam freely, searching for souls to drag into the darkness. But Anna, a girl of fierce curiosity and unyielding courage, was not like the others. She had heard the tales of the Hollow Eyes all her life, whispered around the hearth during long winter nights. But she refused to believe them. To her, they were just stories, meant to keep children from straying too far from home. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees and the sky blazed with the fiery colors of twilight, Anna made up her mind. She would prove to the villagers that the stories were nothing more than myths. With a lantern in hand, she slipped out of her home, her footsteps quiet on the worn path that led to the edge of the forest. The air grew colder as she approached the tree line, the towering pines casting long dark shadows across the ground. The forest loomed before her, a wall of darkness that seemed to breathe and pulse with an unseen life. For a moment, Anna hesitated, her heart fluttering with a flicker of fear. But she pushed it aside, lifting her lantern high and stepping boldly into the woods. The trees closed in around her, their branches intertwining above her head, like the twisted fingers of ancient giants. The further she went, the more oppressive the air became, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The light from her lantern flickered, casting weak beams that barely penetrated the darkness. The shadows seemed to shift and move at the edges of her vision, but whenever she turned to look, there was nothing there. As night fell, the forest grew darker, the world around her consumed by the inky blackness. Anna's footsteps were the only sound, the crunch of leaves beneath her boots, a hollow echo in the stillness. But soon, even that was drowned out by a faint, whispering sound, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from all directions at once. "Anna!" She froze, her blood running cold as the voices called her name, soft and insistent. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, as if the forest itself was speaking to her, urging her to go deeper, to find what lay hidden in the darkness. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to keep moving, her grip tightening on the lantern's handle. Suddenly she saw them, pale ghostly figures emerging from the shadows, their forms barely more than wisps of mist. They drifted towards her, their movements slow and deliberate, as if drawn by the light of her lantern. But it was their eyes, or rather, the absence of them, that sent a jolt of terror through her. Where their eyes should have been were only dark, hollow voids, blacker than the night itself. The hollow eyes moved silently, their outstretched hands reaching for the warmth of her lantern. The whispers surrounded her, swirling like a storm in her mind, their words unintelligible, but filled with a deep, aching sorrow. Anna wanted to run, to flee from the apparitions that closed in around her, but her legs felt heavy, as if rooted to the ground. The hollow eyes drew closer, their cold, ethereal fingers brushing against her skin, sending chills through her body. The light of her lantern flickered wildly, struggling against the encroaching darkness. The whispers grew louder, more desperate, until they were all she could hear, drowning out her thoughts, her fear, everything. The last thing Anna saw was the endless black voids where the ghost's eyes should have been, deep and empty, like the abyss itself. The light from her lantern went out, plunging her into darkness, and the cold fingers of the hollow eyes wrapped around her, pulling her into the void. The next morning, when the villagers ventured to the edge of the forest, they found Anna lying on the ground, her body still and cold. Her lantern was beside her, its glass cracked and its flame extinguished. But it was her eyes that horrified them most. Her once bright eyes were gone, replaced by hollow black voids, as if they had been carved out by some unseen hand. The villagers buried Anna that day, their hearts heavy with sorrow and fear. They spoke of the hollow eyes in hushed voices, their belief in the old tales now unshakable. They knew that Anna's spirit had been claimed by the forest, another lost soul to wander the woods with empty sockets, searching for someone to take her place. And on dark, foggy nights, when the wind howled through the trees and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, the villagers would lock their doors and pray that they would never see the hollow eyes, those ghostly apparitions with their terrible empty stares. For to look into those hollow voids was to lose oneself to the darkness, to be claimed by the spirits of the forest, and to become another of the lost souls that haunted the woods forever. The hunger of the Wendigo. In the cold, desolate wilderness of the northern forests, there is a legend whispered among the hunters and trappers, an ancient creature that stalks the snowy woods, driven by an insatiable hunger. The Wendigo, they say, is a spirit of famine and greed, a monster born from the darkest corners of the human soul. Those who encounter it are doomed to become like it, forever cursed to hunger for the flesh of their own kind. Elias, a seasoned hunter who has spent years in the wilderness, hears the tales of the Wendigo from the elders of a nearby indigenous village. He dismisses the stories as mere superstition, but the fear in their eyes lingers in his mind. One winter, when the snow lies thick on the ground and the cold bites deep, Elias and his hunting party venture deep into the forest in search of game. But as the days pass, the forest remains silent. No tracks in the snow, no signs of life, only the howling wind and the creaking of frozen trees. Desperate to return with food, the party presses on, but the cold and hunger begin to take their toll. One night, as they huddle around a weak fire, they hear a distant, mournful cry echoing through the trees, a sound like the wail of a lost soul. The men exchange uneasy glances, but Elias brushes it off as the wind. Still, he can't shake the feeling that something is watching them from the darkness, something that is neither man nor beast. As the nights grow colder and the food runs out, the men's spirits begin to break. One by one, they fall ill, their faces gaunt and pale, their eyes hollow with hunger. Elias feels the same gnawing emptiness in his own belly, a hunger that no amount of food can satisfy. One night, he wakes to find one of the men missing. Following the tracks in the snow, he stumbles upon a gruesome scene. The man's body torn apart, the snow around him stained with blood. Standing over the remains is a figure, tall and emaciated, its skin stretched tight over its bones, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The Wendigo stares at Elias with eyes that burn with a cold, cruel intelligence. Its mouth, filled with sharp, jagged teeth, twists into a grotesque smile. Elias tries to run, but the creature is upon him in an instant, its breath hot and rancid on his neck. It whispers to him in a voice like the rustling of dead leaves, telling him that the hunger will never leave him, that he will become like it, a creature of endless appetite. Elias manages to escape, but the damage is done. He returns to the camp, but his mind is plagued by the Wendigo's curse. The hunger inside him grows stronger with each passing day, until he can no longer resist its pull. One night, driven mad by the hunger, Elias turns on the last remaining member of his party, tearing into him with a savagery that horrifies even himself. As he consumes the flesh, he feels his humanity slipping away, replaced by something cold and monstrous. By the time he is found by a search party weeks later, Elias is no longer the man they once knew. His eyes are wild and hollow, his body gaunt and twisted, his hands stained with blood. They take him back to the village, but he is beyond saving. The curse of the Wendigo has taken hold, and Elias disappears into the night, leaving behind only the echoes of his hunger and the cold wind that whispers through the trees. The villagers know that he has become one of them, a Wendigo doomed to roam the wilderness, hunting and devouring all who cross his path.